Assalamu alaikum. You're watching Views and News and I'm Faisal Rahman live from our Islamabad studios. Today we'll be talking about the Pakistan's effort regarding the war on terror. I think Pakistan has done a lot in this particular cause and we have sacrificed over 83,000 lives. Just imagine 83,000 that has lost primarily and also about $126 billion worth of loss in our economy. That is huge as well for a country like Pakistan, for that matter. And now Pakistan has in fact presented a lot of dossiers to the international community, including the UN chief as well as United States of America and other concerned authorities, and they have recognized the role of Pakistan as far as the war on terror is concerned, and also the kind of efforts Pakistan has made to bring peace in the region. Now today we'll be talking about a few very important issues that include, it says 27th report on the UN Analytical and Monitoring Team has acknowledged the ongoing efforts of the Pakistan government against elements involved in terrorist activities. It further says that the report on the UN Analytical and Monitoring Team vindicates Pakistan's long-standing position on threats posed to Pakistan and the region by groups like TTP, Jamaat-ul-Ahrar, Hizb-ul-Ahrar and their affiliates based in Afghanistan, including a couple of splinter groups also that has joined TTP. It further says that Pakistan in the past has drawn attention of the international community to the support provided to Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan and its affiliates by the hostile intelligence agencies. One of the results of that support was the merger of Jamaat-ul-Ahrar, Hizb-ul-Ahrar and other splinter groups of Lashkar-e-Jhangvi with TTP in Afghanistan last year. And it was stated by the Foreign Office. Foreign Office further says that Pakistan has also raised the issue of the cross-border attacks carried out by TTP on security forces deployed on its side of the border. Pakistan acknowledges UNMT's efforts in exposing the hostile agencies' sponsored collusion of anti-Pakistan elements in Afghanistan. Now, it says that in 2020, Pakistan handed over a dossier to the UN Secretary General on the Indian sponsorship of TTP and JUA. Both terrorist groups have been designated by the 1267 Sanctions of Committee of the Security Council. And India is seeking to utilize United Nations Security Council's mechanisms to defame Pakistan by portraying itself as a victim of terrorism. It is abusing the Financial Action Task Force to damage Pakistan's economy. So these would be the major areas of discussion in our today's program. We'll be talking about that, but before, let me introduce you to our panelists. We have with us in our studio, on my right, is Tariq Pirzada Saab. Needs to introduction as a senior analyst. Thank you so much, Pirzada Saab, for your time as well. And with Pirzada Saab, we have Shaukat Paracha Saab, who's a senior journalist, anchor person. Thank you so much, Pirzada Saab, for your time as well, sir. And on Skype, we'll be joined in by Humayun Sahab. Fahad Humayun is an expert on foreign affairs. Thank you so much, Fahad, for your time as well. But let me put the first question to you, Tariq Pirzada Saab. Now, this report has very categorically mentioned the kind of role Pakistan has played during the last almost 10 to 15 years, primarily on the war on terror. Look at the losses that has, I mean, we talk about over $126 billion worth as far as the economy is concerned, and 83,000 precious lives have been lost during this war on terror, including the lives of our valiant soldiers. Let's start off from there, sir. Your take.
Well, Faisal, the war of terror has been a war of loss for Pakistan for the most part, to tell you the truth. We had to become a part of it because there was a military threat from the United States. You know, either you are with us or with the terrorists. That means if you don't agree to join this war, we'll treat you as terrorists. That was the direct threat at that time. A lot of people say that it was Musharraf. Whether it was Musharraf or had it been somebody else, the result would have been the same. You would have been forced to, you had to do it because a superpower simply threatened you. They would have started bombing Pakistan. Let me go one step further. Not many people say. They would have started bombing, especially those areas and the border coastal areas, if we had not, because the United States had so much anger built up, not only within, and the government of the United States, of that of Mr. Bush Jr., was under such an extreme pressure that no saner decision could have been reached. So that was the decision they reached. So as a result of that, you know, when you have foreign wars, the result is always terrible. And even other wars to bring a disaster. So at the end of these 21 years of that war, and the war is still not over, and so I would put it this way, life has been very difficult for the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, for the 210 million people of Pakistan, and for Afghanistan as well. I'm not going to exclude Afghanistan, regardless of what Ghani says or anybody says. We are two countries, one people. This is what I have always said. So my hunch is that since Pakistan has made so many sacrifices, you know, after Osama bin Laden's attack, the U.S. Congress came up with a terrible report, and they accused Pakistan's different institutions, Pakistani government, and the whole nation that this is a country of terrorists and this and that. But now, in 2020, when this 27th report of the UN Commission, where UN analytical team has come out, it pretty much vindicates that Pakistan has done a lot. Look at the numbers, that the body bags that we have been able to bear, and of course the amount and the monetary loss that you mentioned in terms of, I mean, the amount is staggering. So my answer is that it's never late. I'm glad that the UN institution itself has put a seal of approval on the magnitude of sacrifices made by the Islamic Republic of Pakistan. Pakistan Army, you know, thousands of Pakistan Army soldiers, and dozens and tens of thousands of Pakistani civilians. Everybody made such a huge sacrifice. In
So
India,
83,000
and let me just
is
quickly,
the figure. This is the number which shows that these many people got killed. Forget about those
we
who
are
were
not talking
injured,
about the
they lost their
wounded.
limbs. I mean, when you talk about bomb blasts or other...
maybe more than 1 million or much more than that, because the number of wounded is always 10 times, 20 times greater.
Correct.
So, and other military losses, you know, equipment, this and that. So it's huge. But here comes the real deal. Now that this report has been published, the admission has been made that of the sacrifices made by Pakistan in the war against terror, which remain largely ignored by the United States and by the world in general. But now that this seal of approval is here, it's time to fully expose the real enemy next door, the enemy state of India. Remember, I have never budged on that point. My point has been, we hesitate when we do not call India an enemy state. It has to be called a terrorist state, an enemy state, because a part of our territory is under their occupation. Number two, they continue, as the report rightly points out, they continue to destabilize Pakistan by facilitating the merger of terrible terrorist groups,
financing
TDP,
them, training them, and primarily providing them with all the necessary
intelligence support, planning,
yeah,
weapons, money, human resources.
and openly admitted by the
Ajit Doval.
Ajit Doval, yes.
I mean, so here's the time that Pakistan needs to adopt a little firmer, little stronger stance on this issue. Expose Mr. Modi, the terrorist of Gujarat, a little more, and let's not talk about facilitating relations with India. It's not going to be, there's not going to be, restoration of the
You need to have a proper conducive environment
as
for
long
that.
as
It's not
a
possible.
part of your map, the new map, which shows that Kashmir is a part of our territory and the Kashmiri people are our people, that means that territory and the people are under the occupation of India.
Correct.
This is now this is the official position of Pakistan right now. So let's make sure that we do provide assistance to the war, to the Kashmiri's freedom
I
movement,
think so that the
as
freedom
much
movement has
and
gained a
in
lot of
appropriate
momentum in the
ways,
last couple of years,
and
yes.
in appropriate ways as it is possible.
Correct.
And it has to be done because it's never late. And if you delay it, the enemy will say, we don't have the will.
No, definitely. Now, coming to you, Paracha Saab, first of all, I think when you talk about Jamaatul Ahrar or Hizbul Ahrar or TTP for that matter, or Shariar Masood group, and so many other groups as well. So these are getting merged, and obviously that is the biggest threat. And plus, on top, when you talk about ISIS, which has its presence in the region, but the kind of attacks they have started, inside Pakistani territory, that is something which is of prime concern. Something happens, and then we get to know that it has been this particular terrorist attack. I mean, the responsibility has been claimed by so and so, and ISIS in particular. That is of prime concern. Now, do you think, sir, after this kind of report and the new administration in the United States of America, things would get better, or you believe that this is the entire situation out there in Afghanistan is going to get so complicated?
Thank you very much. I think first time after 20 years, something has come from the West which is based upon realities. Otherwise, there were fictions about Pakistan.
Correct?
I mean, people being killed here, for example, on the Mall Road of Lahore, there is not a single crossing where there has not been a bomb blast. And who were the victims? The poor Pakistanis, First time this 27th report of the UN Analytical and Monitoring Group, they have come up and they have given the strong options about who are the sponsors, who are those who are the abettors, and who are the victims. And similarly, the second report, bipartisan report submitted in the US Congress, that also draws similar lines. So this is first time that the world is saying yes, Pakistan was right. The world now says yes, Pakistan was the victim instead of an epicenter of terror. And there has been no doubt that these groups, when they were flushed out from Waziristan and other areas, they fled to Afghanistan, wherever there is no writ of the government over there, and they lived in a splinter way, or then they were regrouped, HOA, JUA, TTP, Saifullah group, and
Yes.
others, and they been trying to disrupt, the guarding protection of the border with Afghanistan. There has been an effort, very commendable effort of erecting this fence across Pak-Afghan border. It was basically to shut all those who said that there is a cross-border movement. This report has proven otherwise. I mean, this report clearly mentioned that for the last 2 months, there have been around 100 attacks from other side to Pakistan on the Pakistani security
That's correct.
forces. And I could also relate it, like the martyrdom of Major General Sanaullah Niazi to martyrdom of young Lieutenant Arsalan. They all have been victim of attacks from other side of Afghanistan into Pakistan. The third aspect is that if there had been a parliament in Pakistan from the very beginning, the decision could have been a different. Like after Salala attack, the parliament blocked this GLOCs, and there was no NATO supply till they agreed for something. Similarly, we've seen the role of the parliament in Yemen crisis, for example. The parliament did not approve sending of troops over there. So had there been a parliament, a representative government, and a legitimate government in Pakistan, now we could say that there could have been a different decision. These two reports, now that they vindicate Pakistan's perspective, and incidentally, or a matter of coincidence, this month, FATF is meeting again,
Yeah.
where they have been dragging Pakistan into the grey list. Now, if everything is clear, both at the UN level as well as in the US Congress, I must hope, as a Pakistani citizen who have rendered 80,000, 90,000 sacrifices, then $150 billion of material loss, and then a defaming of my country as epicenter of terror. It was, I mean, anybody coming to
We
Pakistan.
were sacrificing and we were defamed, interestingly.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Anybody coming to Pakistan in those troubled years they would used to say that, "Are you crazy? Why are you traveling to Pakistan?" Such was the defaming of
That's
Pakistan.
correct.
And these two reports at least vindicate what Foreign Office has said. Thus, you quoted Foreign Office spokesman Zahid Hafiz Chaudhry Saab very rightly, translated my feeling, my mean the general Pakistani feelings that we been victims, but we were offended, and now we stand vindicated that what I used to say as a Pakistani 10, 15 years back, 12 years back, 7 years back, today UN monitoring report is saying, the UN people are saying attacks from other side into Pakistan, and this regrouping of terror groups, Hizbul Ahrar or Jamaatul Ahrar or TTP, they are posing a threat in a way that ISIS is very active inside Afghanistan. And the threat is that, as the new Secretary of State Anthony Blinken said, that we will review this accord between Taliban and the Afghan Taliban and the US government. That is a matter of concern, Like FATF is a concern for me, this review indication is also a concern to me. Otherwise, these Afghan Taliban who are now on the path of political, negotiation with the Afghan government, with the US government, they had a good agreement. There is a hope of peace inside Afghanistan. I hope that sanity prevails and they abide by this agreement for the sake of peace, not only in Afghanistan, because as we say, peace in Afghanistan guarantees peace in Pakistan. It's not vice versa. It is a fact. So if peace prevails in Afghanistan, I could feel satisfied that this will also help in maintaining peace, stability in Pakistan as well.
All right. Now, coming to you, Fahd Hamayoun, one of the issue, I mean, that is very, very important, and that is about the role of the particular group, the Haqqani network. Now, we never heard of taking any action against them in the previous US regime. But now recently, whenever you end up reading any article, I mean, this particular name is mentioned again. Now, do you think at some stage this mantra of do more is going to be again put on Pakistan, and will Pakistan be asked to sort of, clear out their certain areas or something of that sort, or rather perhaps take some very qualitative action against the group? What do you say?
Faisal, thank you for having me on your show. In response to your question, I think yes, that's certainly a very distinct and real possibility. We know that the new Biden administration, which is just settling into office, it hasn't even been 100 days since President Biden swore his oath of allegiance. Has the Biden administration still has to undertake a review of its Afghan policy. And when it does that, I think there are going to be some hard questions that it will have to answer. Key among them is whether or not the United States should stick to the May 2021 withdrawal timeline that had been agreed to by the previous US administration and the Taliban as per the terms of the February 2020 agreement that was signed between the two parties in Doha. As per that agreement, it had been decided that by May 2021, the United States would withdraw its remaining 2,500 troops from Afghanistan in exchange for a number of concessions by the Taliban. So far, it seems that the indications that we've gotten from senior US officials, including the new Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, in his confirmation hearing to the US Congress, he said that the United States will in all likelihood undertake a review of that February 2020 agreement. The problem for Pakistan is that if the United States decides to renege on the terms of that deal, if it decides to unilaterally alter the timeline which it had agreed to with the Taliban, that's going to create a number of potential sources of tension, not just between the US and the Taliban, but also between the United States and Pakistan. As you know, Pakistan has exerted a considerable amount of influence and investment in trying to get the Taliban first to talk to the United States, which they were able to do last February. And Pakistan has since played an active role in trying to facilitate ongoing discussions between the Afghan government and the Taliban in Doha. The expectation is that should the United States mess with this delicate equilibrium, which has taken months and months to choreograph, um, you know, all sides will start once again looking for a scapegoat when things don't go the way the United States wants it to. And when that happens, I think we can expect that yes, there will be a certain amount of allegation that will be leveled at Pakistan's door for not doing more to facilitate an end game, which frankly is very difficult to facilitate in the first place, but is also made more difficult by the US shifting goalposts. And so I think in the next 4 months between now, February 2021 and May 2021, Pakistan will have to be very cautious and watch and see how the US policy towards Afghanistan evolves. And to the extent to which the US decides to change or amend the terms of that initial agreement, I think that will certainly color the conversations that the US will try and have with Pakistan about Pakistan's role in the endgame.
All right. Now, brings up another important area. You know, when you talk about the Taliban of Afghanistan, the Afghan Taliban, as we say,
Yes.
you know, when we talk about them, they do not have any sort of, an agenda beyond the borders of Afghanistan. Correct, sir?
Correct.
They just want the foreign troops to vacate the area, and there should be a proper setup, and at least there should have some sort of representation in the system. Correct, sir?
Yeah.
But so when you hear about Shariar Masood group, you hear about TTP, or for that matter, Hizbul, Ehrar, or other such
on,
groups,
yeah.
so and so forth, and the kind of merger and the kind of support. Obviously, money makes the mayor go, sir. That's correct. Over here, sir, what sort of a role do you see of the Afghan Taliban in the presence of these groups inside Afghanistan, whatever their agenda, whether to attack Pakistan or otherwise, but their presence inside Afghanistan, is that a threat to the real cause of the Afghan Taliban, sir?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Look, I've been a great admirer. Let me unequivocally say that. I've been a great admirer, and it has been vindicated, of the Afghan Taliban and their wisdom. The way they have conducted dialogue with the United States in Doha, the seriousness and the commitment they have demonstrated, and they are standing by their commitments. Look, there was a commitment that the violence will be reduced. It has been reduced. There was never a commitment between the United States and Taliban that there'll be an end of war before the withdrawal.
No attacks on the American troops.
No attack. They have honored that.
And other than that, sir, when you talk about, that the intensity of the violence or the attacks on the Afghan forces, for that matter, or again, absolute ceasefire was the word used, sir.
Okay.
And they were not ready for it.
Let me just move one step forward in addition to what you just said and what I said. Look, when Afghan forces, with the air power supplied by the United States, or actively, that is actively contributing and guiding the Afghan army and their attacks against the Afghan Taliban, so the Afghan Talibans are not a dead organization. They have to respond, but that is a defensive mode that they have adopted. If they had not done so, Zalmi Khalilzad is no fool, and the State Department is not a bunch of fools either. They would have ended this, this dialogue with the Afghan Taliban long time ago. So far, the process of dialogue has suited the American policy. It has helped facilitate the limit of the withdrawal of the American forces to the extent it has already taken place. With 2,500 US soldiers left and with some equipment, I think the deal must be honored. But here is the problem. The problem is there is a major influence of India in Washington. A lot of people do not want to acknowledge that. This is a strategic relationship. the success of Afghan Taliban is not acceptable to India under any circumstances. I heard on the day too, when Jane Saki had her second press conference, I stay up until 3:30 a.m. in the morning and I cover Washington. And she said in response to an Indian journalist, question, we'll have very good, much more strengthened relations in the days ahead. I think nobody knows about this situation in Afghanistan as well as in occupied Jammu and Kashmir as Mr. Biden, the new president of the United States, does. And so does, and such is the knowledge of Tony Blinken. The man was very active, when he was, part of the Obama administration. So there are no strangers who are dealing with the situation.
They know the
So when
whole
they are
deal.
talking about reviewing the situation in Afghanistan, they are talking about reviewing the situation in Yemen or Iran or somewhere else. They have some agenda prior to that, before them. For example, let me make sure I'm not I'm missing this point. Look what Tony Blinken said in relation to China. Well, as far as China is concerned, I agree with the Trump policy vis-a-vis the Republic
Containing
of China.
China.
So we know where their mind is clear, and we know where their intentions are not. But let me go back to one earlier point that I have made in probably dozens and dozens and dozens of programs on all televisions. I have been saying in the last 2 years, expedite the process. Tell the Taliban it is in their interest to facilitate the withdrawal of U.S. troops by agreeing to as many demands of the United States as possible. Because if the Trump administration, which was an unconventional, not the Trump administration, Mr. Trump was not a conventional U.S. president. He was the foreign policy of the United States. It was not the foreign policy as we know, the Obama policy or the Bush policy or the Biden policy, the traditional foreign policy. The man had his own mind. He was not a warmonger either. Let me give one credit to Trump, despite all the dislike that I have for the man. He was not a warmonger. He didn't launch wars as other presidents did. So he reached a reasonable conclusion. It was a part of his manifesto to withdraw from Afghanistan, but somehow the governments did not work at a pace that would have resulted in the earlier withdrawal of U.S. troops.
Correct.
And this is exactly what I said hundreds of times, that if you let Mr. Trump, leave the office without any total withdrawal of U.S. troops, the next president, who could be Biden or somebody else, they would certainly not hasten to leave Afghanistan. And that is exactly the situation. And now we are in a quagmire that if their review tells us that it is in their interest to keep certain level of troops over there for a pretty good time, it could take, the events are very...
The actual question is,
let me say one thing.
will that
one
be
last-
acceptable to the Afghan Taliban?
Yeah, this is exact. They said, and it made a headline in newspapers yesterday. They said there'll be a war, and this is where, and you see, it suits the United States at least for the time being. Why?
Keeping the
Because
forces inside Afghanistan.
Look, no, this is the answer. They have only 2,500 troops. The cost is affordable. They can stay there for as long as they want to. It's not a military budget of $100 billion that is costing them. So this is a cost-effective war at the present time for the new administration. They can sit out, the situation for a certain period of time.
All right. Now, Raja Saab, another question which was just popping in my mind. As Pirzada Saab just mentioned that, the policy towards Yemen, they have stopped supplying the arms, or rather, when we talk
Offensive
about
for offensive operations.
Yeah, exactly. F-35's deal was almost done for UAE, but now there seems to be not an absolute reversal, but at least some sort of a check on the supply of weapons to these two countries. Now, when you talk about Iran again, most likely the decision is going to be more or less what they had earlier decided, and that could be another problem for the Saudis and UAE. The question again regarding Afghanistan, sir, Afghanistan is a different ballgame altogether. It's not like Yemen, it's not like Iran for that matter. I've heard very categorically, listening to the new administration, that two of the major adversaries, one is China, one is Russia. Clear, sir? And now their location is right under the belly of Russia, sir, where they have a lot of presence. They can keep a check on their adversary, and the other one on the China, containing China primarily if they want to go towards West. It seems that it is very much in the interest of the Americans. Forget about the government, sir. It could be Republicans, it could be the Democrats. But it seems they might have some sort of a different agenda. Or there could be some sort of a delay in this entire process. Delaying means you're talking about more or less like a civil war situation in Afghanistan. Prasad?
First thing about Yemen, whatever President Biden stated 2-3 nights back when he visited State Department and delivered the speech where he talked about ending the war in Yemen, at the same time he very categorically stated that the integrity and territorial integrity of Saudi Arabia will be protected. So on one hand he wanted to end the war in Yemen, but at the same times, at least what I heard, when he was speaking, there was a guarantee from the US President, the new US President Joe Biden, that the United States still stands by with its obligations or responsibilities or whatever they have their bilateral arrangements, that the territorial integrity of Saudi Arabia will be respected as it has been respected by the previous governments.
Correct.
And you have also seen there was a statement from the Foreign Ministry of Saudi Arabia where they welcomed this statement. They have not rejected it. I have this statement with me. If you want, I can read it out. But I do remember that Saudi Arabia welcomed what President Biden said. And Saudi Arabia has also been supplying humanitarian assistance to Yemen, wherever it could reach, you see. The threat to Saudi interests from Iran, or the alleged supply of weapons from Iran to Houthi rebels, that President Biden also addressed himself. So it's not something that Saudi Arabia is afraid of from the new administration or the utterances made by President Biden. Secondly, when we talk about civil war in Afghanistan, it's already there, I mean, had there been any day when there is no bombing, unfortunate enough, but still, the fighting.
The killings are going on.
Yeah, killings are going on, and that had been one of the strong concerns of Ambassador Zalmay Khalilzad and other US interlocutors, that there must be a ceasefire. Afghan Taliban did not agree. We must make a distinction between Afghan Taliban and Taliban when we talk about Pakistani TTP, you see. So I'm talking of Afghan Taliban. Afghan Taliban did not agree to a complete ceasefire. However, there has been a reduction in the violence, you see, and that has been talked about Ambassador Zalmay Khalilzad time and again, that this violence should end permanently, but still violence is there. And one explanation could be that the Afghan Taliban have this yardstick or this mileage in their hand. That's why the violence. I just spotted one statement by their spokesman, Dr. Naim, 2 weeks back, 10 days back, where he said that we are not part of these incidents. And there have been many incidents where Afghan Taliban expressed and distanced themselves from the killing, whether that was in a hospital or in a school. But still, civil war is there. Now, coming to the question of US presence or continued presence over there, We all remember, I believe, when President Obama announced that we will withdraw, and then there was a surge in US troops inside Afghanistan. Now 2,500 troops over there. For example, if I make a supposition, if President Biden one day says that I pull out my troops, but at the same time they want to have a residual force over there, would they again ask Pakistan or Tajikistan or Uzbekistan to station their troops to show back in United States that we have a complete withdrawal from Afghanistan? So this area or these countries, this region should have concerns about what are the designs of new administration in the United States, what are the designs of Biden administration. Trump was not a foreign policy man, but President Biden is a man of foreign policy. He very minutely knows this region. He knows Pakistan.
Well,
he
he's
knows
been in this
South
business for the last almost 50 years.
That's what I'm saying. He knows Pakistan. He knows realities in South Asia. He knows Afghanistan. So I don't think that they will, simply follow what Trump agreed or what President Trump thought about, because President Trump had no direct knowledge of this region, but President Biden has. President Biden must think about, and we should also hope that since they have many problems and economy is the problem, COVID-19 has been a problem, President Biden should think about peace. He should think about absolute peace in this region, because this region perhaps has been the only region for the last 20 years, because Middle East is also an extended part of this region. If there was war in Iraq and there was war in Afghanistan, I don't remember anywhere else was such a hot wars. These were the war areas. So these areas now also deserve peace, and with President Biden just wrapping up the legacy of these disputes, wars, he should also make plans. He should also pursue the policy of peace inside Afghanistan, and not necessarily the review means negative review from our perspective. The review of their agreement could be positive, that they could hasten the withdrawal from Afghanistan, or the policies that could further ignite the war in this region. Peace here guarantees peace everywhere, because threat to peace anywhere is always a threat to peace everywhere.
But perhaps there is another point before I go to Humayun. I mean, when you talk of the role of the Afghan Taliban, obviously we have already talked about it. But when you listen to what the Foreign Office says, I mean, they have talked about the insurgency in Balochistan that has been also sponsored by the Indians. You talk about the sponsorship of listed terrorist organizations, whether you talk about the names which you already have taken. And on top, making sure that CPEC should be contained, because that is going to be the real economic backbone of Pakistan. And when you talk about the strong economy, that means the country is strong, then it has no threats as such. Now, looking at this particular condition, sir, it seems that whether they have erected these splinter groups or whatever they have done, I mean, this is what suits them perhaps, but this could lead to an absolute chaos in Afghanistan, and most likely this entire peace process could get derailed. And this seems to be the agenda of the Indians now. Do you think, sir, there is a threat to the peace process now? Forget about whosoever is sponsoring that, sir.
First thing first about Pakistan. The resilient people of Pakistan and armed forces of Pakistan, I mean, they unfolded Kulbhushan conspiracy, for example. And then, the Indian propaganda against Pakistan was unfolded by EU Disinfo Lab, and now has been the UN report. Secondly, look at Balochistan, for example. I mean, there were BLA, BLF and others, and that is being taken care by the security forces of Pakistan. The southern, FC and northern FC in Balochistan, they are doing their job. Gwadar has been operational, alhamdulillah, now, and there have been a two division security
Army, yeah.
deployed over there. Then is the fencing that I already talked about. 60-70% of
Has
the
been
job
done, yeah.
that
They'll
has
be able
been
to complete
done.
it by the end of this year, yeah.
This is to ensure Pakistan, to make Pakistan secure. And I tell you, we have to secure ourselves. We have to secure Pakistan. Nobody from outside will come and assure us that we are ensuring your security. No, we are doing, and we have the capacity to make ourselves secure. You know, this is one thing. The other is the CPAC. You see, CPAC, if region, when China is having this BRI projects in different parts of the country, it's not only in Pakistan, for example, Central Asia, towards Nepal and towards Far East. You see, the partnership of many other countries, hardly, I mean, save of India, hardly any other country has come up so covert in opposing CPAC. Many countries in the world, around the globe, whether they are in the European Union or even some countries as far as in the Latin American continent, they are happy about this project. So CPAC will advance as the Chinese, they are advancing, you know. This COVID vaccine is provided by China. You know, China is providing vaccine to different parts of the world. So has been their cooperation with Pakistan. When the people of Pakistan have the ownership of this project and ownership of their security, I personally do not feel that CPAC remains under any threat till we are willing, we have the ownership, and we feel that this is the project of our prosperity, as rightly have been talked about, fate changer in Pakistan. The connectivity, could I imagine that from Peshawar to Sakhar it takes only 10 hours now on the motorways from Islamabad to Thakot will be just 2-hour drive, from Multan to Sakhar 3-hour drives, and when these economic exclusive zones will be established, industry will be installed, and the production will be outflowing to every part of the world. Look at the level of prosperity, inshallah, then.
That's great, but that's an ideal situation. But there are a lot of hurdles.
Challenges
on
are
you.
there.
Would be
Already we've been
tremendous
facing
now.
challenges.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
correct. Now, Fahad, a couple of points for you, sir. And since the Foreign Office has raised some very, very important issues. We have talked about the CPEC. We have talked about the ongoing situation in Afghanistan. We've talked about the splinter groups based there, who've been provided assistance by the Indians, by RAW in particular. Now, we have also learned that close to Nangarhar, the Indians are organizing a new militia, primarily called the Daesh, and this has been sponsored by the RAW, by the Indians in particular, to bring in chaos inside the borders of Pakistan. As we have already talked, that peace in Afghanistan is directly related to peace in Pakistan. But I think peace in Pakistan is something which the Indians do not want. And they give a damn to the peace in Afghanistan also. Your take. Do you agree with this?
Well, I think so. Here, there are a couple of things to keep in mind. One is that the Indians are unlikely to look upon the ongoing peace negotiations between the Afghan government and the Taliban favorably. We know that India has been, opposed to the mainstreaming of the Taliban, has been reluctant to accept the new political reality which has emerged over the past several years. And therefore, the potential for spoiler violence in Afghanistan to, try and derail these peace talks that are going on is there's a very high probability of that. It's already been mentioned in this show that incidents like the capturing of Kulbhushan Yadav and the fact that we have now documented evidence of Indian activities, subversive activities in Afghanistan designed to foster instability and designed to foster instability in Pakistan as well. Taken together, this evidence all suggests that yes, Pakistan is at the moment facing a very heightened threat matrix. Pakistan has to be very acutely aware of the possible risks that could accrue from Indian involvement in Afghanistan, as well as India's sort of support with other sort of non-state groups. This is a openly declared doctrine which India's National Security Advisor Ajit Doval has he's been known to profess this policy of trying to bleed Pakistan by 1,000 cuts. I think there are of course people who think that this is just rhetoric, but I think over the past couple of years, Pakistan has been able to painstakingly gather this evidence to show that there is indeed a real threat that Pakistan faces because of the BJP government that is in power in India at the moment, and which sees cohabitation, coexistence with Pakistan as an impossibility. Um, Given this array of challenges, Pakistan needs to be very cautious and aware of the threats that it faces on both its western as well as its eastern border. Um, I think we have done a good job of trying to fence our border with Afghanistan. The Afghans, of course, are reluctant for that kind of fortification because of the fact that on the Afghan side they don't see the validity of that they call it the Durand line. We see it as an international border. I think it has to be the first line of defense because, as you said at the outset of the show, there are enormous sacrifices that Pakistani security forces as well as civilians have paid in both blood and treasure over the past 2 decades as a result of this war on terror, which has been fought not just in Afghanistan but in Pakistan too.
All right, sorry, we are running out of time. But anyway, thank you very much for your presence. Humayun, it was a pleasure having you, sir.
Thank you.
Always good to see you, sir. And that's all we have for this hour. But a very interesting report that has been issued by the United Nations. It acknowledges Pakistan's efforts primarily against these terror groups, but they have also warned Pakistan that there is a strong threat that is going to be there from Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan and the splinter groups. And as we all know, that whether you talk about the Amjad Farooqi group or Usman Saifullah group, or you talk about Shahryar Masood group, a lot of these characters, they've been eliminated also. But obviously when you talk about money, dollars rolling in, this is what happens. These people, they form groups, they are supported, and then they do whatever they feel like. But at the end of the day, I think our brave and valiant soldiers will look after this threat also, and Pakistan is going to come out as a successful nation as far as the war on terror is concerned. Anyway, I'll see you tomorrow. Till then, you take good care. Khuda Hafiz.